9. The chamber was a Gothic cathedral, but circular, like the massive Orthodox churches that dotted Eastern Europe. 13 alcoves held ornate statues, surrounding a raised dais on which a throne rested. Finn knew that this was the Pantheon, the new cadre of gods led by Alaron. Each god stood rigid, shrouded in shadow, but the power possessed by these beings held heavy in the air. "Well, this is a little much, don't you think?" Lex asked. "Awesome, but over the top." Finn nodded and looked from one statue to another. They stood 6 to a side, and at the center stood the larger form of Alaron, standing tall, his sword held point down, tip piercing a coiled serpent that lay dead at his feet. While Alaron's statue was as lifelike as the god he had met moments ago, the others were shrouded in robes of deep undulating shadows. None of their features were visible. Only differences in statues suggested they were different beings. Was one of these Bryn? Finn's eyes came to rest on a smaller figure in the third alcove to the right. It felt right somehow. "Which of the gods shall you fight for, player? Which of the gods will you worship?" boomed a voice that could have been Alaron's. "Gaze upon the Pantheon. Let your mind find freedom, and your heart will choose." Finn didn't know what to make of it, but a nagging feeling tugged at the corner of his being. He suspected picking Bryn would put her at risk. His gaze moved along the line of immobile gods. None of them felt right, and none could be trusted. So Finn made the choice to choose none of them. A thin god to Alaron's left came to life and walked towards Finn. A sharp metallic beak protruded from his hood. He gazed upon Finn with eyes the color of blood diamonds. Incredible power emanated from the god, and Finn took an involuntary step backwards. The god continued towards Finn and pulled his hood down to reveal the metallic beak was part of a mask. Finn took another step back as the regal figure came close. His crimson gaze pierced Finn from a height of at least 7 feet. With a wave of his hand, the mask disappeared, revealing a thin face and a bald head. "Welcome, child of the Crusade. I am Zekoth, the god of knowledge. You have taken the unusual step of refusing to select a deity, so I will aid you and help you learn. Together, we will discover the truth of your nature and make you anew, to help set you on your path towards destiny." Zekoth gazed upon Finn with black eyes, and Finn's mind expanded with knowledge as if the god were downloading information directly into his mind. Around him, a variety of bipedal figures stood, and Finn knew that he had to choose his race. As he focused on each figure, they moved to the fore, and information about each race came up. His gaze passed over the assembled figures. A tall and regal sea elf stood next to a pale, almost silver-skinned wood elf. An albino white fell elf scowled next to a haughty human known as an Eldarian. A tanned desert-dwelling human known as an Egyptian scoffed at a burly Ordonian, a human race that dwelled in the northern wastes. Next were a pair of dwarven races. The stocky and dour mountain dwarf warily eyed his hill dwarf cousin. Lastly, standing apart from the others was a fierce half-orc. Finn assimilated all the information and cast his gaze back and forth along the assembled races. He knew that this decision was one of the most important he'd make in the realms. And despite his misgivings, he knew he needed some advice. Question is, could he trust his odd banner? Lex, any thoughts? The disembodied AI mumbled. Well, let's analyze what you hope to do here. Since your main mission is to find... Finn gave a sideways glance to Zekoth and cleared his throat, causing Lex to pause. He assumed that this was a recorded intro message, but had no wish to put Bryn in further danger by letting Lex blab like some wah-ha-ha-ha villain. To find wealth and fortune and glory for the Pantheon, all hail to thee, Lex continued, much to Finn's relief. So, it would behoove you to get along with others, or at least not be hated on sight. So, that eliminates Fell Elf and the Half-Orc. Yeah, they're both usually pricks, Lex said. Finn examined his current skills and knew that to survive, he would need to maximize their early efficiency. My skills are skewed towards being lean and agile, with a quick strike capability. So I'd say that eliminates the dwarven races, Lex said. Finn's eyes came to the Eldarians, Egyptians, Sea Elves, and the Wood Elves. All four held some appeal. Wood Elves are snobs, Lex said with distaste, as if he were struggling to recall a half-forgotten memory. And the Egyptians think they're the god's gift to Corin. And how do you know that? Not sure, Lex said, sounding bewildered. Just a feeling, I guess? And I'm supposed to accept these feelings? You must get over your trust issues, buddy, or your time in the realms will be short and sucky, Lex said, a hurt tone in his voice. Finn sighed, once again wishing he'd been able to debug Lex before entering the realms. Despite being his constant companion for a year, Finn had always thought the banner was a bit odd. Now, suspecting his father may have had a hand in the AI's creation, his suspicions intensified. How can I trust him? He's so off. After a moment, Finn shelved the thought. He knew he had no choice but to trust the quirky AI. But I've got my eye on you. Finn looked at the sea elf. He was tall and lean and bore a spark of keen intelligence behind his eyes. The race's style of fighting favored Finn's own, and he pulled the figure forward with a motion of his hand. As he did so, the man's features morphed into a visage like his own, except for the pointed ears. Whoa, a handsome hipster version of you, Lex said. Course, you could always go as a woman, eh? Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. It was then that Finn noticed a shadowy form behind the male sea elf, and with a flick of his wrist, she came to the fore. She was shorter, but no less lean and graceful than her male counterpart. The woman was stunning, and the idea of experiencing life as a woman held some appeal. She looks like your sister, Lex said. Well, that ruins that, Finn thought with a scowl, and spun back to the male sea elf. Finn drew the figure forward and adjusted his features. Lex was right. The man did look like him. Likely the same technology that extrapolated skills from his mind. He needed to be incognito in this world, and hoped that Alaron had no way of knowing who he was. He had only met the man once, and that was in passing. He had no idea if this Alaron had any connection to the real one, or if he was simply a computer-generated avatar. But in Finn's experience, no risk was too small to ignore. Plus, while he wasn't overly vain, even he had a few things he'd like to change about himself. Finn nudged the nose stronger, changed the eyes to a pale blue, and turned his dark brown hair to a deep black. He couldn't help but add a few inches to his height, bringing him to 6'2". He knew he wanted speed and mobility, so he didn't bother to add any bulk. Finn examined his avatar and smiled. He approved the sea elf. Zekoth stepped forward.
As a purchaser of the deluxe beta pre-order, you are awarded the Ancestor's Boon perk,
the god of knowledge said with a tone of wonder.
You are upgraded to an El Adrine, the legendary high elves of yore, from whom all elven races devolved.
Finn's sea elf morphed again, becoming taller still. The eyes turned a wondrous blue with flecks of silver. His cheekbones sailed higher on his face, giving him a regal appearance. His skin darkened to a well-tanned hue, and his dark hair transformed into a cascade of flowing platinum. A prompt popped into his vision. El Adrine are stronger, smarter, faster, wiser, and longer lived than their descendants. You have also been awarded 3 racial gifts. You have been awarded a racial gift, plus 10 bonus attribute points, for a total of 30 to distribute as you choose. You have been awarded a racial gift, night vision, up to 120 feet. You have been awarded a racial gift, quick mana and health regeneration. Mana and health regenerate 25% faster.
Sweet,
Finn thought, before realizing that the system had essentially ignored his selections and preferences. But the High Elf's perks more than made up for any cosmic irritation Finn felt. He sent a silent thank you to Bryn, his eyes drifting to the hooded figure he imagined represented his sister.
Are you done selecting and modifying your race and gender?
Zekoth prompted. With only the slightest hesitation, Finn nodded.